morning. Step 6, my word. Just a sobering thought, by the time you get to step 12, it'll be New Year. Nights are drawing in. You see, I just thought I'd throw that one at you. It's not an official way of looking at the 12-step program, but I see it as 4 groups of 3 steps. Those first 3 steps, 1, 2, and 3, are what we've called the foundation steps. They're the things upon which we build our faith. Step 1, we don't do it our way. Step 2, we'll do it God's way. Step 3, in which case we will obey Him. And those are the foundations of our faith. If something goes wrong in our faith, the chances are that those are the things you need to look at. Perhaps we're doing something in our own strength, trying to do it our way. Or we're not trusting God. Or we're simply, God is telling us to turn left and we're turning right. You know, if something's going wrong, those are the places that we can start. But the next 3 steps, steps 4, 5, and 6, which we finished today, are really what you could call preparation steps. And they're born out of a desire, I think, that once we've got the foundations in place, we want to live an abundant life, don't we? Not in any kind of greedy way, that I want it all in a materialistic way, but we want to experience that kind of peace and love and joy in an abundance. We've all been at some stage, I would dare say here, where we feel that we've been on fire for God, haven't we? Where we've been right in the center of what He's doing, and we think, I want that. I want that sort of more often. I want to be right at the center of what He's doing. And so we have these preparation steps. Step 4, we look at ourselves honestly and deeply. And then we decide, what are we going to do with the things that we find, the good things and the bad things. The good things, dead easy, we hand them to God. Whatever we've got, the heart for young people, a maths ability, cooking ability, organizational skills, doesn't matter what it is, we simply hand it over to God and say, do you think you can use that? Do you think you can use it? Not as I think you should, but is there any way that you can use that for the kingdom? We hand it over. And then we came to step 5, which was the difficult one. That was the really tough one. That's the one where we take the negatives and we say, what are we going to do with them? And the answer is we've got to deal with them seriously. We've got to bring them before God. We've got to acknowledge them. And then we bring them into the light, telling somebody else, and we deal with them. Now, that was the tough step. I am very pleased to get step 5 out of the way, honestly. It's necessary because the 12 steps are like a tower, like blocks that you put one on top of another, or links in a chain. You can't skip one. Much as you would like to sometimes, and churches do. There's lots of churches that skip step 5 stuff altogether. But I was very gratified last week, and I shared this with Jamie, I think, last week or week before, that I know in a previous church I would not have been allowed to preach step 5. Or if I had, I would never speak again. They would say, there's no way that you can challenge people like that. What we want is to encourage people. We want to tell people that Christianity is just so simple. You can be anything you want to be. But I was gratified when I preached last month that a number of people came over and said, do you know, I needed that. And that just reflects a better quality of people that we've got in this church. And that's not said to flatter people. We have a quality church here because people want to go deep and they're prepared for the challenge. Despite that, though, I'm still glad to have got step 5 out of the way because I like steps. It's not because it's a fun-packed step and all nice, but it's a step that is so unexpected. Nobody sees it coming. In fact, whilst there are lots of churches who don't do step 5, that challenging stuff, there are kind of none, it seems, that very often do step 6. Not because it's difficult, but simply because they think, what? So let me explain it. Let me kind of run with this. You see what I mean? That was step 5 that we looked at last month. We admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So we look at all the stuff that's in us and we bring it into the light and we start to break the power of it because it holds us back. So the next step, we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. We went to God in the right spirit and said, can you deal with this? Now, you might look at it and say, well, hang on. What's unexpected about that? That seems to be the next logical step. We found a fault, and then we go to God with the right attitude and say, deal with it. Find a problem, fix it. How is that unexpected? Well, what's unexpected about that, of course, is that isn't step 6. That's step 7. That's next month, spoiler. That's July. But then there's another problem, isn't there? We kind of look at those 2 steps and we think, well, wait a minute. How can you fit a step between those 2? They're adjacent. They're next to each other. Find a problem. Go to God, get it fixed. How can you possibly find a step to go between the 2 of them? But there is, of course. So let me engineer a situation. Imagine this. We have an evangelistic meeting. We get the local evangelist in to come and do a meeting for non-believers as well. We invite friends and family. And he does his stuff because he's a good communicator. And then he has an altar call at the end. Come forward if you want to receive Christ into your life. First-time commitments. And he's done a great job. 20 people line up in front. Now, I don't care who you are. If you preach, you love people to respond to your message. I know there's lots of people who say, no, I'm not bothered about that. Yes, you are. You love people to respond. Okay, we don't do it in a prideful way and say count 20 and then put it onto Facebook and then wait for people to say what a mighty man of God we are. We don't go that far. But you like it. So this guy's probably feeling really good. 20 people lined up there. So he goes to the first one and he says, do you want to receive Christ into your life, brother? And the brother says, yes. And he's just about to pray for him when somebody steps in from the side and says, excuse me a moment, and turns to the one who's just about to be prayed for and says, are you sure? Do you really want to do this? Are you sure you haven't just responded emotionally? Look, what I'm going to suggest is you go back to your seat, you sit and you think about it. And so the guy says, yeah, all right then, and goes back to his seat. And then he starts moving down the line. Now, what do you think the evangelist is thinking at this point? I would imagine that the phrase laying on of hands is taking on a whole new meaning for him. At the very least, he's going to try and get between this guy and say, what are you doing? This is ludicrous. This is crazy. I've worked really hard to get these people to come from there to here, to sign them up on the dotted line, and there you are sending them back. What sort of crazy thinking is that? Well, the answer, of course, is step 6, thinking. Because this is step 6. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. See how it sandwiches between the 2? We find a problem, we go to God and get it fixed. But before we do that, the big question comes in and says, do you really want it fixed? Are you entirely ready for that? Do you know what you're doing? See, we meet a lot of guys in prison who would say, oh yeah, do you want to get clean of drugs? Of course I do. But when you probe a bit, you discover that what they really want to get rid of is not the drugs, but the consequences. They would much rather get rid of the drug use, but be able to manage everything. Or guys will say, well, yeah, crack cocaine, heroin causes me a problem. Yes, I need to get shot of that. But what they really want to do is get rid of that causes them the difficulty, but stick with the weed and the alcohol. They are not entirely ready. And we need to understand that because we have a Christian world that we're part of that goes right to the other extreme. We've all been in meetings, I would guess. We've been around Christianity enough time, where the evangelist stands on the front and has this altar call and invites a keyboard player to create a little bit of atmosphere with a few chords behind, and then says, right, can you bow your heads, close your eyes, and while everybody's head is bowed and their eyes are closed, raise your hand if you want to invite Jesus into your life. Yes, thank you, sir, seen you. Yes, thank you, madam. Yes, you can put your hands down now. God has seen you. And that's it. At the end of it, Yeah, 20 people responded, and if anybody would like to come forward and have a chat at the end, have a chat, and then we'll go off and have coffee. We make it so simple. Do you fancy salvation? Yeah, right then. I'll have a bash. We make it so easy because we are concerned about the numbers. The very last thing we want to do is to send anybody who's responded back because they need to think about it, whether they're serious in what they're saying they want to do. So it's just the numbers. 20 responded. I haven't got a clue what was in people's hearts, in their heads, in their desires, or where they're going to go. Liz and I have been at meetings where the same person has gone forward to give their lives to Christ week after week after week. This must be the 10th time they've done it. Every time the evangelist turns up, they're at the front giving their life to Christ again. So step 6 is a very real, and I love the steps for that reason. They are so real. They don't allow you to live in cloud cuckoo land, in a spiritual sort of bubble. Do you want what you're asking for? See, there's a great Hillsong number that we sing on occasions that's got a great line in it. It says, break my heart for what breaks yours. Great line. Now we could sing that, hands in the air. What if in the middle of that, God stepped in and said, stop the music. Break your heart for the things that break mine. Well, let me tell you, what my heart breaks for is a world out there that's living without hope, that's turning upon itself, that's fighting itself, that is lost, that is broken, and is lonely. And my heart breaks for that, so much so that I can't do nothing, which is why I sent my son to suffer and die upon a cross. Now, I can break your heart for those things if you want, but are you entirely ready for that? Because if I do, it may cost you. You may not be able to sit and do nothing. Or you may not be nailed to a lump of wood, but you may have to understand what it means to pick up your cross daily and follow me. You may have to understand that. It may not mean a horrible, persecution-filled life, but it may mean you've got to put that relationship down or start doing something you weren't doing before or stop doing something that you are. It may cost you. Now, I can break your heart for the things that break mine, but are you ready for it? And that's the question that is posed by step 6 before we step out. Now, don't get me wrong here. This is not a matter of saying if you're not prepared to be entirely ready and put everything down, you're not a proper Christian. This is not Jesus saying to the rich young ruler, give away all your money to the poor, otherwise you don't count. I mean, there are people who do that, who put down everything. People like Janine. Anna's probably with Janine now or very rapidly or soon. And she is somebody who put everything down, sold up one-way ticket to Kenya. But it's not, if you're not prepared to do that, you're not a proper Christian. But the question is, have you thought about it? Have you thought about the journey and what it might cost? What might you be needed to give up? What might it cost you? Otherwise, we sing this stuff, we say this stuff. Yes, Lord, you are everything to me. You are my passion. You are the air I breathe. But I'm still going to get more excited about the football this afternoon than I am about you. And Alfred mentioned that earlier. It's what we do. So the question is a very real and relevant one. Now, what we do in prison is when we come to this particular point, is we use a character called the prodigal son. I think I'm just going to let's put step 6 up there. So that's it. Keywords, entirely ready. That is step 6. Let's focus on that. We use the prodigal son as an illustration. He's one of the stories that we use a lot in prison because it answers this question when guys come into our group and they say, do you have to be a Christian to come? What sort of person are you dealing with? And the prodigal son illustrates that. So I just like to look at him. But I want to look at him, because he's a famous story, you'll know the story, from a different perspective. I want to look at him from the perspective of the 12 steps. Because you'll find that the prodigal son is a character who's exactly where we are today. He knows those first 5 steps that we've looked at over the last 5 months and stands facing step 6. So let's just read it through. We're reading from Luke chapter 15, verses 11 to 32. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him, put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate." We know the story well, don't we? But let's step back up. There we go. The prodigal son story has three little sections, really, doesn't it? First of all, there's the outward journey. Here is a kid who goes to his dad and says, "Hey, you know what I'm going to get when you die? Well, I want it now. I want it now." Now, that's not totally unheard of in Jewish culture. It is possible to hand your inheritance over early. There must be occasions when the father was sort of old or couldn't manage running his estate, so he hands the inheritance over early. But it would be expected that the person he handed it to would stay and look after him and consider his interest. But this kid doesn't. He gets all that he feels he's entitled to and leaves. And we understand that, don't we? Isn't that something we see in the world so much these days, if we're honest? People who demand their rights. Very big on rights. It's my right to do this. It's my right to have that. But a little bit less keen upon reflecting on the responsibilities that go with it. It's very much a modern situation, isn't it? Demand your rights, but not so keen on the responsibilities that go with them. And that's this kid. He goes to a distant country where those responsibilities are a distant memory. And in doing so, he cuts himself off from his support group, his moral support group. Now, we've seen a lot of guys in prison do that. They get clean from drugs, they connect with God, they come out of prison, they go to meetings, they go to church, and they walk well. And then they get on their feet and they think, "I think I'm okay now. Thank you, church, for supporting me. Thank you, meetings, for helping me. Thank you, God, for your help, but I'm okay now. Thank you very much." And they walk away. People do it. They leave church. People walk away because they think, "I don't need that anymore. I can manage on my own." And for a time, they do. Not everybody who walks away from church or walks away from God just falls flat on their face in the next week. Their lives go okay until the circumstances change. Until redundancy hits, cancer strikes, or the relationship they've invested all their money in, all their time and their heart in falls apart. And so what happens to this kid? Famine strikes, and now he's got nobody that he's plugged into there who can support him. So his life spirals out of control. And he finishes up in a pigsty looking after pigs, which for a Jewish lad must have seemed like what he could call rock bottom. Now, rock bottom is an interesting phrase. Liz and I have heard a number of people use this idea of rock bottom. My life has hit rock bottom. And it's a dangerous phrase because it suggests that the only time we're going to change our lives is when we hit something called rock bottom. But there is no such place. If we think we've hit rock bottom in our life, try living in Syria for a bit. And you'll see that it's only a matter of perspective. But there are situations when our life does come to a problem. We meet it again in prison. You don't have to be a genius to wake up in prison at the start of a 5-year stretch and think your life needs to change. You don't wake up each morning and think, hey, I'm living the dream. You know something has gone seriously wrong. So to decide to change your life when you hit the pigsty or the prison, or when you wait for your life to spiral to a point where it's intolerable, is not the only time that you'd be motivated to change. What this kid experiences is not hitting rock bottom, but what I've called here a pigsty moment. A pigsty moment. And okay, his pigsty moment is there in the pigsty, and it happens in verse 17 where he says, he came to his senses. That's all. That's your pigsty moment. When he came to his senses, the penny drops and he thinks, hang on, my life needs to change. We don't know what sparked that off. Perhaps he dipped his hand into the pig swill, brought it up to his mouth thinking, I'm going to eat that. The smell got to him and he thought, this is crazy. My life needs to change. It's his pigsty moment. But there's nothing wrong with a pigsty moment. In fact, I've called this message, Embrace Your Pigsty Moment. Because a pigsty moment is a good thing. It may not seem like it if your life's hit rock bottom, but a pigsty moment is something we should encourage and welcome and embrace. Because without a pigsty moment, nothing will ever change. You can have a pigsty moment this morning if you like, when the penny drops and you look at your life and you think, hang on, my Christianity is not what I know it could be. I've been on fire for the Lord, but it's a long time since I felt that fire. And I want that. And I need to do something about it. That's a pigsty moment. People who don't have pigsty moments never change. And there are lots of people in churches who never have pigsty moments. They just go along week after week, turning up, going through the same thing in the same way, stuck in a rut. And what is a rut? Just a shallow grave. And if we don't get a pigsty moment where we think, I want more than this, we will continue not to change. This kid has a pigsty moment. Now, his pigsty moment, when he comes to his senses, is effectively step one, isn't it? When the penny drops and he thinks, I've made my own decisions, I've done it my way, I cut myself off from my father, I went to a distant country, I tried to do it all in my own strength, and look at me. Step one hits him. He has done step one, which is the important starting point. It's where we begin everything. Without step one, we never take a move. When we can sit and look at our Christianity and think, I've been doing it the same way, week after week, month after month, year after year, and nothing has changed, then I've been doing it in my own strength and changing nothing. When that penny drops, that's a great place to start. But step one on its own is not the answer. It's the start. You need a plan. You need something. It's no good just waking up in prison and thinking, I need to change my life. And we say it to kids, to guys week after week, what exactly are you going to do? And sometimes they'll say, dunno. When I get released, I'm going to go back to my hometown, stop with my own mates, do the same thing I was doing over and over again, but this time I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and hope for a different result. Well, that's insanity, that. To do the same thing and expect a different result is just crazy. You can have step one, come to your senses, but if you don't have a plan on what you're going to do, nothing's going to change. So the kid does step two, doesn't he? How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? Here I am, starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father. See, I'll go back to dad. It's a good plan. Because my dad's way works. Even my servants are better off than me. He's worked out step one, my way doesn't work, and he's accepted step two, that his father's way does. He even does step three. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your servants. See, I'll do anything you want. Step three. Whatever you ask me to do, I'll do. So he's got the foundations in place, and that's really a good thing to do. He even does step 4 and 5 as far as he's able. Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. He acknowledges that it's his problem. It's not the church's problem. It's not somebody else's problem. It's his. It's what he's done that's caused the issue. So he's done all those 5 steps, all the 5 steps that we've looked at in the past 5 months. And they're great. They prepared his mind brilliantly. But of course, he's still in the pigsty, isn't he? He's had all these steps, but he's still in the pigsty. That's why they're preparation steps. It's only now he's confronted in the same way that we are this morning with step 6. You've got all that in place, but are you entirely ready to do something about it now? Are you entirely ready to go on that journey back home? And there's the question we're asked today. Are you ready? Are you ready for this journey? It's only when he says yes to step 6 that his journey actually begins. When we are ready. Question is, are you ready? Now, it's my judgment of this church, which I think is an amazing church, and it's an amazing church because it's got amazing people, that the real answer to that is yes. That you are ready for that journey. But consider just for a moment this kid. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've done them all. I agree them. My mind is prepared for the journey, but now I'm asking myself the question, am I ready for this long journey because I'm in a distant country? Am I ready to go back to my dad? Now, when he leans on that pigsty fence, wall or whatever, debating this question that we're debating this morning, are we ready to go? One of the things that will come into his mind, I guess, is, are there any alternatives? Is there anything else I can do? Because it's a long journey, it's a long road. Is there any other way? Well, of course there are. There are 3 alternatives. The first one is do nothing. You don't have to do. You don't have to get out the pigsty. You don't have to change a single thing. The kid might say, well, if I stop here, I can get used to pig swill. It'll be all right. I can survive. Perhaps I can press down in me this desire that even my father's servants are better off than me. Perhaps I can just say, well, this is as good as it gets. And we can do that as Christians as well, can't we? We can say, yeah, okay, I'll accept where this is. I might always look at people who are living the dream in Christian terms, like Janine, and think, well, it would be nice to be that. But no, that's not me. We can do nothing. That is an option. There's a second option. Explore locally. See if there's a better quality pigsty just down the road or something. Just do a little bit. See if there's some way of changing your life by doing a little bit. We can do that as well. We can just tinker about with it. I'll do 10 minutes extra on my quiet time. I'll turn up at church 2 weeks out of 3 instead of every other week. I'll do a little bit, just enough, and I'll see if that makes a difference. And see if something comes along. We can do a little bit. But there's a third option as well. We can get on the journey and give it a time limit. I'll walk back to my father and I'll go 10 miles. And if my father hasn't come and picked me up in that 10 miles, I'm going to stop and come back. And some people do that. They plug into church, they get involved, they say, yeah, I'm really going to go for it. But after a couple of months, they turn back and they say, look, I've been doing all this active Christianity for 2 months. My life has not blazed into flame. It doesn't work. I'm not bothered. See, waste of time. I'll go back to what I used to do. We can do that. We can put a time limit on it. If God, my Father, will come and get me in the first 10 miles, that's fine. But that's not what it's about. All those 3 alternatives have one thing in common. They want a big result for a little bit of effort. To say yes to step 6 is to say, I'm going to open that pigsty door or gate, I'm going to close it, and I'm setting off home. And I do not know how long it's going to take me. I do not know when that point of breakthrough is going to come. And neither do we. We don't know. It could be today. It might be tomorrow. It could be next week. It might be a month. It might be a year. It might be 10 years. I mean, Janine has wanted to be a missionary in Africa since the age of 7 or 8. It took something like 30 years before she got there. Or more, 40 years. Now, it's not that in between the desire to be a missionary and actually going out to Kenya, there's a wilderness. No, huge numbers of blessings on the route. But it was only at that point that the ultimate purpose of her life fits into place. So I don't know if you set out on this journey when that breakthrough will happen. I haven't got a clue. And I know there will be trials en route. There will be people who get alongside you and say, stop here, who try to distract you, who will tell you to turn left, turn right, come back. It's why Jesus said to the disciples when they went on a journey, don't greet anybody on the road. Because anybody you meet on the road is coming the opposite direction. You've nothing in common with them. They will try and distract you. It's why we need to get alongside each other. We've said we build on each other. People build on you, you build on them, because together we go on this journey building on each other, and we keep going. When one of us seems to sort of flag and think, no, I'm at the point of quitting, it's other people who encourage you to go on. No, I think we've got a church like that, don't you? That will go on this journey and will encourage people to stick to it, to keep going until that point of breakthrough. Because it is a great church. But it's an individual choice, isn't it? Are you entirely ready for what it might cost you? Because it's a long journey. There was a point in this kid's life, I guess, where he was 100 meters away from his dad, look in the business, money in his pocket, heading to a distant country. There's another point where he's 100 meters outside the pigsty, feeling dirty, scruffy, burdened. But he's in a better place leaving the pigsty than he ever was leaving his father. Because now he's facing home. Which way are we facing? You can be 10 meters away from the cross with your back to it, 100 miles away facing it. You're in a better place when you're facing it, when you're looking at it, and you're on that journey. And it's a brilliant journey. See, although this step is a challenge, there's a promise to it, isn't there? This kid set off on his journey, and he didn't know for certain what was going to happen. He didn't know whether he'd be accepted. He just hoped for it. But what did he do when he got there? After he walked those steps and he came into the Father's view, and at any point before that he could have stopped. He could have stopped 10 paces before he came into the sight of his Father and would have missed it. But he kept going, and one step took him into the view of his Father. And when that happened, and that breakthrough happened, and that moment occurred, what happened exceeded everything he could possibly have anticipated. He got acceptance, he got the ring, he got the cloak, he got the feast, he got the celebrations, he got compassion, he got love. Everything, every bit of it, far exceeded anything he could hope for. And why? Because the dead was alive again. The lost is found. The one who was distant comes close. And every step that we go on as a church, every step you go on as an individual takes you closer to God. And as we come into the center of it, like the clay on the potter's wheel, it's that gets fashioned into the pot. The stuff on the outside gets flung off in the end. You come closer. There's a picture here just to finish with, I guess, because God's got this promise. I know it's a challenge, but it's a promise, and it's an exciting one because of where we get to, where we're headed to. But sometimes for a lot of people, life is like a vase. Put a big vase up here. We go to the kitchen and we fill it up with water. We fill it right to the brim, and it's like our energy, right, I'm topped up, I'm ready to go. But the vase has holes in it, and that drains out. And we watch it, the level drop, until it's empty. And then we have to go back to the kitchen, get the pot, get the jar again, fill it all up, and now we feel better, and then it drains down again. Ever felt like that? I know a lot of school teachers do, because they taught that language. They said, I feel drained, I feel empty, I feel I've got nothing more to give. But it even happens to people in church. They say, I need to get to church on Sunday because I need to be topped up. And pastors who don't get topped up often burn out because people are calling on their time and they drain down. They've got nothing left to give. And that can be the cycle of people's lives, and that's not the cycle that God wants us to go on. Because as we go on this journey heading home, God says there's a simple message here. Don't run back and forth to the kitchen, topping up the vase. Take the vase to the kitchen. Put it under the tap and let the tap flow into it. And then it will always flow out, and it will never drain dry. And the only time it starts to drain dry is when we move away from the tap, when we stop doing the journey, when we say, no, this is it, I'll stay here. Are we ready to go to that tap and keep each person here on that journey in line with that tap where God is pouring out His Spirit? Are you ready for that? See, I think we are. I believe that we are. I'm almost tempted here, I don't do kind of, the altar call in that way, to ask people to stand if they're ready to go on this journey, if they're entirely ready and so on. But it did strike me today, when we're doing communion, and that song that we sang, Just As I Am, is a great song. I'm just tempted to see, would the worship team sing that again? And the reason for that is that was the song that was playing on Good Friday 1988 when I invited God into my life. Just As I Am. That was the song. Now, I didn't actually go forward because I didn't feel I need to. I explained that when I give my testimony. But it's a real powerful song to me because God says, just as you are, come. And if that's what you feel this morning, if that helps you in any way as we sing this, then come. Symbolically take a step out of that pigsty and say, I'm ready for the journey. Can we stand, folks, and let's just sing. If you want to respond to that and come forward, brilliant. I'm already here. I'm responding to it. Amen. God bless you. Yeah.